Let's talk about clothing. What we choose to wear when practicing and performing plays a major role in our own personal safety. No one wants their clothes to catch fire, but sometimes accidental fuel transfer and ignition can happen, and our clothing choices play a big part in what that outcome might look like. Now, there are two main factors to consider when choosing suitable clothing: the material it's made from and the weight of the fabric, which refers to how thick it is and how tightly it's woven. Various materials react in their own ways when exposed to the heat of a flame, while the fabric's weight influences how quickly it can ignite and how easily it burns. First, let's look at the materials our clothing is made from and how they behave. For simplicity, we're going to break these into two categories: natural fibers and synthetic fibers. Materials such as cotton, wool, and silk are all considered natural fibers, whereas materials such as polyester, nylon, acrylic, and elastane are all considered synthetic fibers. Now, the reason it's important to identify which materials your clothing is made from is because natural fibers and synthetic fibers behave very differently when exposed to the heat of a flame. While natural fibers can ignite easier, they will burn to ash and often self-extinguish over time. Synthetic fibers, on the other hand, may resist ignition a little bit better, but once they've caught fire, they will often continue burning and quickly melt. Synthetics are made up of plastics, and that molten plastic is going to stick to whatever is underneath. And in most cases, that's going to be your skin. So it should be pretty obvious now that natural fibers are the safer option, and synthetic fibers should be avoided. But what about blends? Clothing that is blended needs to be treated as such. It's a combination of different materials, and it will share the characteristics of each as they burn. We need to make sure that the vast majority of our clothing is made up of natural fibers. And as a general rule, I don't suggest wearing anything that is made up of less than 90% natural fibers. So what if that costume you absolutely love is made up of synthetic fibers? My advice is just to find something else. But if you're going to risk it, make sure you have an underlayer made up of natural fibers that separates the synthetic material from your skin. That way, if the worst should happen, the melted plastic fibers will have a barrier to your skin. Some performers will choose to use fire retardant chemicals on their costumes, and while this will make ignition much harder, if the fire is the result of an accidental fuel transfer, the material still has a high risk of melting as the fuel burns off. The chemicals may stop continued ignition, but the material is still going to melt under the heat of a flame. In addition, certain fire retardant chemicals can pose toxicity risks when they come into contact with skin, particularly with sweat or prolonged wear. Now we have a good idea of what we should and shouldn't be wearing, let's take a look at another important factor, which is the weight of the fabric. Now, the weight of a fabric refers to how thick and how tightly it is woven. Thicker materials take longer to heat up to their ignition temperature because they have more mass to absorb the heat. A tight weave allows less oxygen to reach between the threads, which makes the material harder to ignite and less likely to stay lit. In contrast, a light, airy fabric with a loose weave will ignite more easily and burn more completely. So something like thick denim will be much more resistant to catching and staying on fire than something like, say, a lacy cotton top. Now, I am a big fan of practical tests. If in doubt, and whenever possible, you should always do a burn test with a small sample of your clothing to see how it behaves. With that in mind, let's take a look at a few different pieces of clothing and see how they behave when exposed to a flame. We're going to be doing a burn test on samples from 4 different items of clothing. The clothing on the left is made of natural fibers, whereas the clothing on the right synthetic fibers. First, let's take a look at the denim jeans. These are made of 100% natural cotton fibers, and as you can see, they have a heavy weight and quite a tight weave. The t-shirt is also made of 100% natural cotton fibers, but as you can see here, it's a much lighter weight and has a less tight weave. Here we have yoga pants, which are made of 100% synthetic fibers. This material is pretty lightweight and also super stretchy due to its synthetic fibers. Next up is stretch pants, and as the name implies, they are super stretchy due to their lightweight, loose weave and synthetic fibers. So let's set these on fire. As you can see, all of these samples lit up instantly. That is because they've been pre-soaked in Coleman fuel in an effort to replicate an accidental fuel transfer and ignition. To safely replicate and demonstrate how these burning materials might interact with our skin, all of these tests have been done on leather. As you can see, the synthetic fibers on the right are not faring too well. They have quickly shrunk and quickly started to melt. When we look at the natural fibers on the left, we'll notice that the material itself isn't burning away as quickly. The flame we're seeing is mostly from the fuel that's still present within the fibers. This is why the denim jeans are burning for much longer. It's because it is a heavier weight and therefore will hold more fuel. Looking back at the synthetic fibers, we'll notice now that both of these are sustaining a flame. All of the fuel has now burnt off, and the fire that you're seeing is the ignition of the material itself. Let's speed up this test and see what we're left with. Due to them being a higher weight and having a tight weave, the denim jeans didn't even burn to completion, and the fibers that did burn have turned to ash. This is why we always choose natural fibers for our clothing. It doesn't shrink, and more importantly, it doesn't melt. Due to its lighter weight and looser weave, the cotton t-shirt hasn't fared as well. However, it has mostly burned to completion. There's still a small part in the middle that remains unburnt. These yoga pants have given us the perfect example of why we do not wear synthetic fibers. The fibers quickly shrank and melted to the leather. Now I want you to imagine, what would a hospital have to do in order to get this off your skin? The answer is, they don't. Both the melted plastic and the affected skin below it have to be surgically removed before you can recover. Now let's take a look at the stretch pants. Due to these being a lightweight and a loose weave, they shrank very quickly and formed a molten plastic puddle. Clothing like this is a terrible choice because it ignites easily and it melts quickly. This is going to give you less time to react before getting injured. After all these tests, there is a clear winner. Leather. Ethics aside, leather is undeniably one of the most fire retardant choices you can make when it comes to costuming. Now hopefully these tests make it clear just how differently each material behaves and the importance of making good clothing choices. Now remember that natural fibers can still catch light, but they tend to burn away safely, while synthetics are going to melt and stick. And remember, fabric weight and weave also play a role in how fast something ignites and how long it burns. Understanding these differences will help you make smarter clothing choices and greatly reduces your risk during practice and performance moving forward.